Crime Stands Still. One season, one story by Marjorie Orban. The podcast that delves deeply into true crime stories post-conviction, resolving cases, bringing you new evidence, fresh perspective, and revisionist theories, the whole truth and not just what the jury heard. Giving voice to the voiceless is my passion and the inspiration behind this new Just Us project. I'm a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and multi-published award-winning true crime author. I'm also a national speaker and expert in criminal pathology. Crime Stands Still retells what happened from why through reenactments, verbatim testimony, transcripts, audio recordings, and first-hand journal compositions, bringing you different voices and points of view, the suspects and others that you won't find on any other podcast. Subscribe, listen, and download for free from your preferred podcast app on Apple or Android devices. Original score, sound design, and mixing by composer and drummer Marjorie Orban. Episode 4. Exposure. So apart from sabotage theories, there was also the very glaring problem of how the victims' remains had been found and when. There were 7 weeks of unaccounted for time between September 8th, when Jay went missing, and October 23rd, when he was found in the desert. The explanation the state gave for why Jay's remains, which were found in a tightly sealed plastic container in over 100-degree temperatures, was not more decomposed, was that his body parts had been frozen. But if that were true, his skin would have shown obvious signs of discoloration, marbling, deep red purplish patches. It didn't. Instead, it looked slightly pink, too fresh. The defense offered another plausible explanation. Jay had been alive those 7 weeks. More problematic for the state was the fact that no one had managed to produce a freezer capable of containing a 300-pound human torso. The state's expert suggested another explanation for the slower decomposition: removal of the organs.
Whoever did this was skilled enough to sever the spine, drain the blood, and remove the victim's spleen, liver, pancreas, and intestines.
She theorized that with the internal organs removed, it would have been easier to saw through bone and avoid the rib cage. While the stomach and intestines would have been simple enough to remove, the kidneys would have been a challenge.
If you didn't know they were there, you wouldn't see them. And had they not been removed, a short jigsaw blade would have never been able to reach the vertebrae.
According to the defense's forensic pathologist, it would have been impossible to cut through even the tibia with such an instrument. He'd performed an autopsy and dismemberment of a pig, the bones of which he found shockingly similar to a human's.
I attempted to cut as many bones as possible with the jigsaw to see how deep I could go. But when it would not even penetrate the vertebrae, I did continue trying to dismember other parts of the pig.
He said whoever had done this had to have used a longer blade with a greater reach, like a sawzall, which looked more like a swordfish. But no such blade had ever been found in Marjorie's home or in Jay's warehouse. And anyone trying to use a jigsaw to dismember Jay would have had a series of broken blades. Interestingly, the only sawzall police recovered belonged to Larry Weisberg's son-in-law, Brad. But the state's forensic anthropologists insisted that
a frozen body is easier to cut. Unfrozen, the body is too squishy. If I were going to do this, I would dispose of the soft tissue, freeze it, then cut the vertebrae.
Instead of pig, she experimented with a human bone.
The jigsaw cut through it like butter.
The blade the expert used during her testimony came from Jayhawk International Warehouse. Police had found an open package of jigsaw blades there. 2 of them were missing. The state had another problem, which, according to the defense expert, Dr. Patrick Hannon, had more to do with biomechanics.
In order to get the full-sized, unmutilated, near 400-pound body into the freezer, Marjorie would have had to turn the freezer on its right side, lay on the floor beside him, then squish him in with her feet. There's some degree of contortion involved, and the body would freeze in that position. Once she did that, she'd have needed a forklift to get the freezer back upright. Inside the freezer, the full-sized male would have had to been contorted in order to get the lid closed for freezing. But it was likely a man Jay's size never would have fit inside in the first place. Getting him out would have been what I'd call a significant movement. You'd probably need to use a rope. It would be pretty much impossible without a rope system. With two people, you could use climbing rope and circle the body while it's in a frozen state, stabilize the freezer so it doesn't tip over, and someone who is not significant weight would have a very difficult time. Again, I'm not sure one person, unless that person is 400 pounds.
Can you just picture it? How would I, at my size, possibly lift a several 100-pound tub into the back of an SUV? Dr. Hannon demonstrated with a tub he brought to court with him. It was supposed to replicate the blue tub found in the desert with Jay's remains. He brought bags of rock salt, too, and in front of the jury filled the container until it weighed about the same as the real one. Then he measured the height of the table where I was sitting and essentially said it was the same height as the SUV and had my lawyer stand behind the table to hold it in place.
So you get down low, grab the ankles, and if the ankles are too big, you grab the wrists. And that could be a problem, again, for somebody Mr. Orban size. But you get down low and pull. If you're strong enough, if you're really strong enough to produce 195 pounds of force in this awkward position, what happens is you move towards the body and your feet would actually slip, okay? And that relates back to Newton's third law of motion. So in other words, if I'm down low like this, I'm pulling and I'm strong enough to produce in this position a 195-pound pull. Instead of the body moving towards me and inching back, what happens is my feet slide, okay? And I move towards the body. So, in other words, if I'm down low like this, and I'm pulling and I'm strong enough to produce in this position a 195-pound pull, instead of the body moving towards me and inching it back, what happens is my feet slide, okay? And I move towards the body. Would you believe I used to be a competitive weightlifter? A 130-pound woman could not lift this, but two large men, definitely.
The prosecutor, who sat poker-faced during the demonstrations, suddenly sprung to her feet and fired off what she hoped would be a deadly shot. Would your experiments and calculations be irrelevant, she said, if a person had a ramp and a dolly?
A ramp and a dolly? I was never told anything about a ramp and a dolly.
When Dr. Hannon was shown a picture of the dolly police found in Marjorie's garage on the day of the search warrant, he said the dolly depicted was too small and awkward to have fit the tub, and the ramp was far too short, only 12 feet, to have accommodated the high tailgate of Marjorie's SUV. Realistically, it should have been at least 20 feet, he said. The fact that Marjorie may have purchased a metal ramp at one time from Walmart did not make it ominous. Was it so crazy? The prosecution baited the jury to believe that someone of Marjorie's size and stature could have committed such a brutal crime. Her defense lawyer suggested Larry certainly thought it was possible.
That's why he framed her. He dumped her body in Marjorie's backyard so the police would connect it to Marjorie and her Bronco. I mean, can we all at least agree she's a bad parent? Sure, she should have said something after Larry shot him. It was her son's father. But does that mean she killed him? I mean, we're not the morality police, right?
They found his futon in the desert with Jay's remains.
Isn't it just a little weird that Larry was a hunter, and on his first outing, he shoots an elk and helps skin it with a combat knife that just so happens to be capable of producing the same kind of cuts we saw on the victim.
He hung the antlers from that elk as a trophy?
And what about that reciprocating saw? The one that belonged to Larry's son-in-law, Brad.
Brad's vehicle matched within 1 inch of the tire tracks found near Jay's remains. Did Larry borrow his SUV?
What about all those orange electrical cords police found in Larry's shed, but with no power tools?
You mean the shed Larry destroyed and built over?
I was sure the police were going to arrest me after they searched my shed.
Yeah, that one. Brad had power tools.
Larry was big enough and strong enough to kill and move that body. He was a weightlifter, a former deputy sheriff. He knew how to handle evidence, and he knew about Valerie Pape.
The case was national news. Marjorie's lawyers certainly thought it was possible Larry had capitalized on the similarities to set Marjorie up. After all, petite Valerie Pape, who owned a chic boutique in Scottsdale, had bought a reciprocating saw weeks before she fatally shot her husband. Witnesses saw her dumping his remains in trash bags in bins near her driveway. Police never recovered the victim's head or the bullet they believed was still lodged in his brain. Pape's child told the judge she had recurring nightmares about searching for her father's body parts. But Valerie Pape had motive: a stormy marriage and troubled finances. Still, as hideous as the case was, Pape pled guilty to second-degree murder and received a 16-year sentence. Was Marjorie ever offered a plea bargain?
She said she'd rather be put to death than admit to something she didn't do. Look, I don't know the specifics of Pape's case. I mean, the two cases were so similar, but, well, they never found the victim's head. Apparently, he was shot in the head, and without the head, there was no bullet, and even though Pape admitted a gun had been fired, and police apparently even found the gun hidden behind the seat of her Jaguar, nothing actually linked her to the murder. Except her confession, which of course was in French, and she claimed her English was poor and maybe something got lost in translation. Yada, yada, yada. Eventually, she admitted to shooting him, but not to cutting him up. There was speculation that she had help. Some guy living in her guest house who worked with her at her salon. He was never charged, arrested, or otherwise implicated, and of course, he fled to France as soon as he could. The cases were pretty similar.
To a desperate man like Larry, who by his own admission
Had no idea why I was given immunity. I just signed whatever my lawyers put in front of me.
Valerie Pape was a convenient scapegoat. Maybe that's why Larry had left the tub so close to Marjorie's house, and to the road, and to any passerby, making it nearly impossible for the police not to connect the dots. But what the jury didn't know, what had not been investigated, was that DNA traced 3 people to the tub. None of the profiles matched Marjorie's. On September 14th, 2009, 5 years after the crime, jurors filed into a packed courtroom to deliver the verdict.
I don't know what I felt, actually. Relieved, exhausted, excited, hopeful. The courtroom was packed. Everyone was there. Reporters, producers, Jay's family, the detectives, the lawyers, the jurors. In some ways, it was like waiting for the curtain to rise on a show, except that for the first time, I almost couldn't breathe. I didn't know the moves. I hadn't choreographed a thing. As we waited for the judge, I felt myself sort of float outside of my body into endless space. It was as if all of this was happening to someone else in another life. It was surreal. So much had happened, and yet my life had been on hold for so many years. I'd changed so much, aged so much. I was no longer a mom, or a dancer, or even a person. Who knew it would be so hard to be a person? Suddenly, I'd become a frumpy-looking, scared older woman in a black cardigan, gray slacks, and a thin striped blouse. and I'd been witness to a crazy kind of circus where people, trying to save themselves, talked about me in third person, said I was some kind of butcher or monster capable of cutting up my best friend. It was insane, all of it. But as I waited for the judge to take the bench, I was so hopeful I would wake up and this horrible nightmare would be over.
But as the bailiff read, Count 1, first-degree murder, guilty, Marjorie remained stoic, unflinching, poker-faced.
In a capital case, there are 3 phases: guilt, aggravation, mitigation, and penalty. If jurors found, for instance, that aggravating factors existed, Marjorie would be eligible for the death penalty.
During Phase 2 of Marjorie's capital trial, the prosecution reminded the jury over and over that Marjorie was not the typical Scottsdale housewife, but a mom so independent, fit, beautiful, talented, skilled, and, quote, shockingly evil, heinous, or depraved, end quote, as to have chopped up her child's father.